Well, happy Sunday. Let's talk religion for a moment. I went on my run this morning and I go past several churches. And I started thinking about why religion and going to church was not emphasized by my parents in my life, why it was not a custom for us because we didn't go to church. Well, with the exceptions of when we would go visit my grandmother, for Easter, we might attend her church service before we would go to lunch. But that and when we would go maybe visit the church across the street from the house my parents had in Mexico City for Christmas, we might go over there, say a prayer, get the holy water, do all that stuff, and that was the extent of it. We were not practicing Catholics. And just for some background, my mother is Anglo and my dad's Mexican. So from my mother's side of the family, she grew up in a Baptist household. My grandmother was very active in her church, and God rest her soul. She passed away 8 years ago at the age of 102, and she was my favorite grandmother. And I had some great memories of her telling me Bible stories. And when you're a little boy, some of those stories can be pretty intriguing and kind of scary at times. But my grandfather, my grandfather worked for the railroad for like 40 years, and he was the kind of the type of guy that would give a person the shirt off of his back. A hard worker. And as a rail mechanic, it wasn't uncommon for him to find hobos in the rail cars. And he would actually bring them home and give them something to eat or even give them clothes. But he didn't like church. So he was a good man, but he didn't like church. He was very critical about the intentions. He questioned the authenticity of the preachers and what their true intentions really were, and even went so far as to call them charlatans. That was a choice word that he used for them to describe many of the preachers, what he thought of preachers in general. And he would never go to church. So my grandmother was the one who would go to church, and he wouldn't go. From what I've been told and I understand, I don't think he ever attended a service. Now, my my dad's side of the family, they were, from what I understand, my grandmother was pretty devout Catholic. They would go to to serve to mass or whatever you do. I'm Catholic. I was baptized Catholic, but because I didn't really grow up with all the customs. I don't really know other than mass and I guess going to church or whatever. I don't know what all the different terms are, but he attended church when he was young. Now his father didn't. So it was kind of like my other grandfather, and he didn't go to church. And what I understand about my grandfather, he had fought in the Mexican Revolution and had a very tough childhood. And I don't know he came from very humble origins. I think that he, from what I've been told, was indigenous. And they say that my dad believes he was Yaqui. I don't know how true that is. I took one of those ancestry DNA tests, and while I definitely do have indigenous ancestry from Mexico. It's all from central Mexico. So I question the veracity if it's actually tied to the specific, the Yaqui tribe. But the reason I bring that up is because I wonder if that had any type of impact on his attitudes towards religion, towards Christianity, and I don't know if that's what impacted his lack of a desire to attend church or what have you. And I didn't know him. Unfortunately, he died before I was born, so I never knew my paternal grandfather. I knew my maternal grandfather. He died when I was 4, and I have vague memories of him, but I do have memories of him before he died. So, I look at that kind of, and my dad, even though he would talk a big game about how important religion was, the actions weren't there because he didn't make me go to church on Sunday. You know, he didn't say we're going to church. It wasn't something that was a consistent practice with us at all. We just didn't go growing up, and so the reason I thought about all this is because for a while, and especially being an older person who's just recently moved to a new place, I thought about church as being a possible way to establish some sense of community, to meet other people. But I have a reluctance to do so. And the reason I have a reluctance is because I just kind of look at the potential for church as being, the church as being a potential for being kind of like cultish. And and while I believe in like the 10 Commandments, for example, I think all of that is just common sense for humanity. Throat's dry. Can't get my and drink some water. While I think the 10 Commandments, for example, I mean, that makes perfect sense for humanity. Those are rules that every man should live by. I just it feels like organized religion is just a fairy tale. I think that we've always, mankind, we want to understand why. Why is all this? How did it come about? Big Bang Theory. And I think that essentially you had a group of hunter-gatherers that, got around the campfire one evening and started telling stories of creation, just ideas about how things came about. Why does the sun rise? Why do the flowers bloom? I don't even know if they had a sense of concept of time in the very early days, but they're just questioning, why is this? Why does this happen? Why does these different phenomena happen, right? And so they started telling creation stories, right? So you had one group of hunter-gatherers that had their creation story, and then over in another area, you'd have another group of hunter-gatherers that had their entirely different story of creation with their own, creator or God. And then inevitably, these two groups would clash, and I'm right, you're wrong. Your God is you're wrong. You deserve to die because you believe in that. And that's what religion has turned into, to be quite honest. I mean, if you look at it today, the reason that we have a lot of all the wars that we have is a result of fighting over religious beliefs. You're fighting over basically fairy tales because we don't know for sure. We just don't. We don't know. We really don't have any clue. And I believe that there is a creator, there is a God. There's got to be some type of force that did all of this. But for us to try to name it, and for one group to presume that they know best of what that force or energy is over the other group, that's what doesn't make sense to me. And so that's my hesitance, because if I go to church, and a long time ago, I want to say about 10 years ago, a friend invited me to a Bible study, and I went along. I kept an open mind and said, I'm going to go. And, we were reading, we each took turns reading from passages from the Bible. And God, I'll tell you, it's like reading Old English, I mean, my eyes just kind of glazed over. I felt like I'm, it's not sinking in. I'm not getting it. I'm just, I can't, I feel drowsy. I know maybe that sounds bad. I just can't can't get into this. No matter how much I wanted to, I can't. And I wanted to be nice to everybody. I can't get into this. And the guy that invited me, after everything was said and done, I think he could kind of tell, uh, just based on my affect, and he's like, he told me, just give it a chance. Come back again. Just try to give it a chance. But needless to say, I never went back. I just could not get into it. It wasn't, and like I'd mentioned before, my favorite grandmother had told me Bible stories way back when, and maybe at that time it was kind of more intriguing, but maybe now as an adult reading a lot of this stuff, it just comes across to me as a fairy tale, and I just can't get into it, and um, this kind of reminds me also, because I'm another friend of mine a long time ago back in college invited me to. They had like a non-denominational church that he attended, and he invited me to a Sunday service, and now that was definitely very cultish, and that's kind of gave me a bad vibe. But uh, I remember being in that service, and I think maybe there were some people in the audience that made the mistake of maybe whispering or saying something during the service, and the guy that was giving the sermon, I mean, he got really mad. He yelled at him. He said, he pointed out the people that were in the audience talking, and said, "There's no talking," or I don't remember exactly what he said to him, but I thought, man alive, man, that's not something I want to be a part of. I ended up going to lunch with them afterwards, but it just I got a my intuition was telling me run the other way. This is almost kind of a Branch Davidian feeling, and so and in a few months down the road, that friend who had originally invited me had told me a story about how he was interested in one of the women that was also attending, uh, and they were interested in each other. They started dating, but the other members found out, and they were pretty much warning him, don't, you can't have this relationship with her, so I don't want to be in a situation like that, where that's what I'm worried about. If I join a church, and it's good to have a support network of people to have some sense of community, but I don't want to have overbearing people in my life who try to, you know, I guess cross boundaries, that ignore boundaries and don't respect boundaries and try to get overly involved in each other's lives. That's not something, because I'm a very independent person. So that's not something I could deal with. That's part of the reason that I'm kind of it's hard for me to be part of a group like that, because I don't want to be in a situation where some other people are trying to be overly involved in my life and telling me what to do, or even sabotaging potential relationships, right? Like this happened with this friend that I had back in college. So and so it's just, and even back to the fairy tale thing. Even when I was a child growing up, I remember a time in seventh grade when this girl, we had this discussion about religion, and I'd mentioned that I was Catholic, and she had mentioned that she was Baptist, right? And she told me that I'm going to hell because I'm not Baptist, because I wasn't baptized, that I was baptized Catholic rather than Baptist, right? And so that it's little things like that stick out to me, that make me think that religion, organized religion especially, is just a form of brainwashing. And I even leads me to my other example later, when in my in my 20s, when I dated this girl, and they were Baptist, right? And they were really like, going to church all the time, and that was really important to them, and yet. And that was the source of contention in our relationship. One of the reasons that we ended up not breaking up or the relationship fell apart was because I didn't go to church. And I remember one time, at one point, we had an argument, and she had been in a really bad, abusive relationship. Her ex-husband had hit her. He physically abused her. He had been involved in criminal activity, had been arrested, had been in jail. And we had this argument, and she brought him up in the conversation when she was basically lambasting me for not going to church with her. And she made the comment that, well, at least so-and-so, this ex-thug husband, who was a thug basically, at least he would go to church with me. And that's just another example for me how people are just brainwashed with some of this with this stuff. So that's kind of my big apprehension about joining a church, when I have all these examples in my life of how people have used religion as a weapon and as a way to I don't know. I don't know if the right word, exalt some type of superiority over other people and lecture other people on how they're wrong, when, in the end of the day, we're all human beings, right? None of us is better or has more knowledge of the world than anybody else. We're all on this planet together, right? So yeah, I just wanted to kind of get that off my chest, because again, I've been thinking about joining a church, but I'm very apprehensive about the aforementioned aspects that I've just mentioned, and some of the examples that have led me to those examples in my life that have led me to the attitudes that I have in my life towards religion. But I was also interested in kind of exploring how my parents never emphasized that in my life. And, even quickly going back, I think ideally my dad wanted to make religion and going to church a part of our lives, but my mother was the resistance. And I think that he relented to her. That's my hypothesis. That's what I think really happened, because I think my mother probably kind of rebelled against her mother, my grandmother, because she was so religious. So that's really all I have to say. I just wanted to get that off my chest and talk about religion on this Sunday, since it's fitting, because it's everybody goes to, a lot of people, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people do go to church on Sunday. So I'm curious to hear other comments. What are your perspectives out there on religion? Do you go to church? What are your reasons for going to church or against going to church? So please let me know down in the comments section. I'd be happy to read those comments. Happy Sunday, everyone.